Right, hello guys, welcome back. From the moment you're watching this video, we have exactly 1 month until the Edge of Fate expansion releases, marking the end of the year of the final shape and ushering in a new era of the game. And as such, we will be saying goodbye to all of the seasonal or episodic content that came out during the final shape, which of course includes episode Echoes, episode Revenant, and episode Heresy. So today I've created a list of weapons from each of the 3 episodes that you should 100% have at your disposal and actively be grinding for. If not, since in a few short weeks they won't be earnable anymore, at least not as easily as they are now. This video will only include weapons that are having their acquisition sources completely removed, so weapon sets like the ones from the Vesper's Host Dungeon, Garden of Salvation, or Vault of Glass raids won't be included because these will always be available on a rotational basis, despite releasing during the episodes themselves. So without further ado, let's begin with episode Echoes. Episode Echoes, unlike Revenant and Heresy, supports weapon crafting for the majority of its seasonal weapons, these being the Radiolaria Transposer set of weapons which fully support weapon crafting, and as such, if you have the time, you might as well try and get them all. But if your time is limited, here are my picks for the ones you'll want to prioritize. Lost Signal was the first ever area denial frame grenade launcher, and I would strongly encourage you to pick one up. Reason number 1, area denials are excellent for rapidly building matching Transcendence energy, and because Lost Signal is the only darkness area denial currently, with it being stasis, and there seemingly being no indication of a stasis or strand one coming in the Edge of Fate, this makes it a one of a kind and a must grab for this reason alone. Area denial frames are also quite good for taking advantage of tick-based damage methods like bolt charge, mainly because each volley from the grenade launcher deals 22 ticks of damage and each shot fires 5 volleys, which is quite a lot of tick damage, and hence why you often see them used in bolt charge damage scenarios, since the faster you can tick a boss, the faster you build your bolt charge and subsequent lightning strikes. My personal god roll recommendation would be autoloading holster always, and then either one for all if you're using it for Transcendence energy generation, or Vorpal weapon if you're using it for damage rotations. Chronophage is a void legendary trace rifle that is one of 3 in that slot to receive the shoot to loot perk, which for trace rifles in particular is quite a nice utility, with it being able to snipe ammo from afar, but I will admit this is a little bit niche, so only go for this if you've really got nothing better to do, since technically it is the only void trace that can roll with shoot to loot. My god roll would be shoot to loot plus destabilizing rounds. Aberrant Action was the first ever solar rocket sidearm, and despite the nerfs, it is still a very good weapon and a must pick for so many scenarios. The sheer nature of it being a rocket sidearm combined with the heal clip perk make for a nasty combo that keeps your health sustained in even the most difficult content. I was even using it recently during the Rite of the Nine prophecy when the attrition modifier was active, so if you haven't got one already, I would highly suggest going for it. My personal god roll for Aberrant Action is heal clip Incandescent. You could swap Incandescent for a damage perk like Swashbuckler or a utility perk like Demolitionist if you really wanted. Also, there is a new solar rocket sidearm coming in the Edge of Fate called Pure Recollection, and shout out to Fallout Plays for putting together this known perk spreadsheet for it, and as you can see, it's currently unknown whether it gets heal clip in the left column, so best to get your hands on Aberrant Action now on the off chance it doesn't. Last on the list for craftable weapons is the Stasis Caster Frame Sword Ill Omen, and I wouldn't say this should be your top priority, but I did want to take this opportunity to mention that caster frame swords are excellent for total damage purposes, meaning that if you have a longer than usual damage phase, it might be beneficial to just have one of these swords in your back pocket should that situation ever crop up, and the perks on Ill Omen are about as good as it gets when it comes to swords. My personal god roll would be Relentless Strikes and Whirlwind Blade, and while we're here, you might as well get yourself a perfect 5th caster frame Ergo Sum if you haven't already, which I would be kinda shocked by if not, since the final shape has been out for over a year now, but I get it though, grinding Overthrow can sometimes get very boring very quickly. Now we're moving on to the reprised Season of Dawn weapons that are not craftable but can be focused at failsafe or earned with double perks per column by completing the Enigma Protocol activity, starting with Perfect Paradox. Perfect Paradox is a kinetic rapid-fire shotgun that originally released during Curse of Osiris, could you believe it? And now it's back for its 3rd time and arguably in its most powerful state. And I'm just gonna tell you outright, this is 100% the best legendary shotgun in the game, purely because of the origin trait Cast No Shadows. This trait makes it so dealing melee damage refills 20% of the magazine rounded up, so for a Perfect Paradox with 8 in the mag, each one of my punches will refill 2 shots into the magazine, and this works with literally any melee ability you can think of: Threaded Spike, Consecration, Penumbral Blast, and so on. But the craziest one by far is Incinerator Snap on Warlock, because each of the bolts fired from the melee count as their own melee damage instance, meaning that with just a single snap you can reload your entire magazine. The best setup to pair with this shotgun is to run with Trench Barrel and a Song of Flame Warlock who's on boss stun duty, which is exactly what you're seeing in the background gameplay, and as you can see, you never have to reload and the damage is actually pretty decent as well. I will leave a dim link to this build in the description if you're wanting to try it yourself, but yeah, this shotgun is very good and I would strongly recommend getting one, especially since it isn't craftable. In fact, I would recommend getting 2 rolls, one that has field prep trench barrel for any song stunning applications like you just saw, and another that has 1-2 punch plus any utility perk like threat detector or threat remover for any 1-2 punch builds like Strand Titan for example. Line in the Sand is an arc precision frame linear fusion rifle that is currently the only linear that can roll both deconstruct and a damage perk like bait and switch simultaneously, which I'm not scared to admit is total copium, and it's unlikely that we will get a boss that's considered a vehicle and has an easy to hit crit spot anytime soon. And unfortunately, the Zoetic Lockset boss from Sundered Doctrine actually fulfills this criteria perfectly. The only problem is that it's still bugged and isn't receiving crit damage properly. So the one place in the game where this role would be somewhat useful in isn't even responding correctly. So you decide if you really want this, but it shouldn't be a priority. Martyr's Retribution is probably the best in-slot solar waveframe grenade launcher currently, but that also isn't really saying much. Waveframes have been totally outclassed by rocket sidearms and will likely remain this way, but just in case, I thought I would at least give it a mention and suggest going for at least one role that is either Heel Clip Incandescent or Envious Assassin Incandescent. So that about does it for episode echoes, and if you'd like an idea of what order to farm the weapons, please refer to the priority graphic visible on your screen now. So now let's move on to the next in line, Episode Revenant, starting with Noxious Vetiver. But before that, I want to note that all Episode Revenant weapons are not craftable, meaning the game will probably demand additional grinding from you in order to get the specific god rolls you want. But if you interact with the tonic system enough, it should get to a point where obtaining the weapon you want is relatively straightforward. But yes, because they aren't craftable, it's even more important to hold on to these weapons, since if you delete them, you can't just recraft them. Anyway, Noxious Vetiver is an arc precision frame SMG that is not necessarily the strongest archetype per se, but the origin trait and perk selection make up for this incredibly well. You see, this weapon is part of the Dark Ether weapon set, and each and every one of them comes with the Dark Ether Reaper origin trait. This trait makes it so getting kills will eventually spawn in a Dark Ether charge that can be detonated for a significant amount of damage that also fully reloads and overflows the magazine for all Dark Ether weapons you may have equipped. Normally, my Noxious Vetiver holds 29 in the mag, but after detonating a Dark Ether charge, it rises to 41. But it also raises the magazine size of my Bittersweet, another Dark Ether weapon in the heavy slot, which we will talk about shortly. Perks wise, it also gets the very strong combo of Attrition Orbs Jolting Feedback, which would definitely be my recommended god roll. So if you like SMGs, then definitely get your hands on one of these. Liturgy is a stasis double fire grenade launcher that is a one-of-a-kind drop, because it is currently the only stasis double fire in the game, and it also rolls with the DPS meta combo of Envious Arsenal and Chill Clip. The reason this is so valuable is because it provides a way of constantly applying a darkness debuff to whatever boss you're fighting, which is particularly important for any teammates that are running Facet of Courage, because this buffs all light ability damage versus darkness debuff targets by 10%, including supers like Thunder Crash, Celestial Nighthawk, and Nova Bomb. So in general, it's considered standard practice to have some form of darkness debuff applied to a boss during a raid or dungeon encounter, but besides that, in general, it's just a very solid DPS weapon. So for that reason alone, I would highly encourage picking one up, specifically with the god roll of Envious Arsenal Chill Clip. On the topic of DPS weapons, Revenant also gave us the Bittersweet Arc Adaptive Frame Grenade Launcher, which is currently the only arc grenade launcher to roll with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch. And I know that grenade launchers aren't particularly prevalent in the DPS meta anymore due to rockets taking the spotlight, but you never know, it might be worth grabbing one of these in case we get a grenade launcher specific artifact perk, or they just straight up receive a buff. So this one is kinda middle priority, but I thought I would at least point it out. Next is one of my favorite weapons from Revenant, and that is the Vantage Point Arc Adaptive Frame Pulse Rifle, mostly for the same reasons as Noxious Vetiver, in that it has the Dark Ether Reaper origin trait and gets some pretty good rolls to pair with it. There's something about this pulse rifle that just makes it feel good to use, and I would strongly encourage you to try it, particularly with either Stats for All Jolting Feedback or Eddy Current Jolting Feedback. Plus, next season we are getting Anti-Barrier Pulse Rifle as part of the seasonal artifact, meaning Vantage Point will be able to stun 2 separate champion types, barriers from the mod and overloads from Jolting Feedback. Within Episode Revenant also came a reprisal to a select few Splicer weapons from Season of the Splicer, and the first one I want to briefly highlight is Chroma Rush, not because I think you should get one, but rather to let you know that a better weapon is replacing it in the Edge of Fate, which is the Kinetic 720 RPM auto rifle Giver's Blessing. And again, thanks to Fallout spreadsheet, we can see that Giver's Blessing gets the combo of Rewind Rounds Kinetic Tremors, which is just straight up better than the perks offered by by Chroma Rush, so don't worry about farming it, just wait for Giver's Blessing. Ignition Code is also probably the best blinding GL in the game for whatever that's worth in the big 2025, so I guess if you never got a good Ignition Code back in the day, you could try and get one now, but in all honesty, blinding or disorienting grenades, as they are now known, are not really meta anymore and are in general pretty redundant. So if you already have an old one, then I really wouldn't bother getting the new one unless you really want one with the Splicer Surge origin trait. Lastly is the Grid Skipper Void Rapid Fire Pulse Rifle that I would 100% recommend getting, not only if you're a fan of pulse rifles but just void weapons in general. Grid Skipper gets the combo of Repulsor Brace destabilizing rounds, which is currently one of the best, if not the best combo to have on a primary weapon, mainly because destabilizing rounds was changed in Episode Heresy to where it now grants you 5 seconds of volatile rounds after scoring a kill, which is able to turn any average weapon into a total ad clear monster. So that's it for Episode Revenant, and again, please refer to this particular farming priority order if you aren't sure what to go for first. Moving on to Episode Heresy, once again, none of the seasonal weapons are craftable and must be earned randomly, though fortunately the Tome of Want is a much less complicated system than the tonics from Revenant, so farming for a specific drop is way easier in this particular episode. So the first weapon you should 100% be getting your hands on is the Psychopomp Arc Area Denial Frame Grenade Launcher, again for many of the similar reasons to Lost Signal. It's great for rapidly building light transcendence energy, and it's also quite suitable for damage rotations, given that it can roll the combo of Envious Arsenal Elemental Honing, and in general, arc damage is a little awkward to come by in damage rotations, so having that component taken care of with Psychopomp in a rotation that features, say, Liturgy and Hezen Vengeance, also with Elemental Honing, is very beneficial. Double or triple perk variants of Psychopomp and all Heretical Arsenal weapons also come with the Runneth Over origin trait from the King's Fall weapons, where reloading near an ally overflows the magazine, so if you can, try to get one of these variants as well. Overall, my personal god roll recommendations for Psychopomp are Ambitious Assassin Rolling Storm for a more general ad clear / transcendence energy gain tool, then another with Envious Arsenal Elemental Honing for anything DPS related, ideally with the Runneth Over origin trait. Adamantite is the second ever support frame auto rifle that is strand affinity this time round, but regardless of that, it's always worth having any healing autos that Bungie release, purely because they're an excellent tool in high level endgame content like contest or master raids and dungeons. And while Adamantite isn't as strong as No Hesitation, is in a separate slot, giving you more freedom for your energy slot. So again, just because of the fact that it's a healing auto automatically makes it worth having in my opinion, with my personal god roll being Reciprocity Frenzy. Watchful Eye is an arc aggressive frame machine gun, which is the newer frame released with the final shape, with the first one being Pro Memoria, and this one isn't necessarily a high priority since corrective measure is just straight up better, but Watchful Eye is the only arc aggressive frame and can roll with some pretty solid combos like Overflow Rolling Storm and Overflow Killing Tally, which is standard for most machine guns and is indeed very solid. So up to you if you want this one. You can think of it as basically a more modern 21% Delirium. Leave a comment if you remember that weapon. Lastly is purely a novelty pick, and that is the Refusal of the Call Strand Adaptive Frame Glaive, mainly because 1, it's the only strand glaive and there doesn't seem to be another coming out in the Edge of Fate, and 2, as a result it's able to roll with Slice in column 1. Glaives are admittedly a very niche weapon type, but purely because of the fact that this one is the only one of its kind and rolls with a pretty solid meta debuff perk in the form of Slice, I would just get one and throw it in the vault. You never really know when it might be useful in the future. That's it for the weapons I would recommend chasing for Episode Heresy. Again, here's the farming priority order, but at least for Heresy this isn't as strict as with some of the other episodes. The last section I want to discuss is the craftable exotic weapons that come from each of the 3 episodic missions, so Choir of One from Echoes, Slayer's Fang for Revenant, and Barrow Dyad for Heresy. My recommendation is to acquire all 3 and fully upgrade them to the best of your ability, especially in the case of Choir of One because it's one of the best weapons in the game, period. And it won't take you terribly long to complete all of the quest chains, especially now that all of the time gates have been long since removed. So set aside a few hours and make it your mission to chase down these weapons. If you are short on time, then I would suggest getting Choir of One first, then Barrow Dyad, then Slayer's Fang. So there we have it. That's all of the seasonal weapons I would strongly encourage you to farm before their acquisition sources get removed from the game before the Edge of Fate. Let me know if you agree with my picks in the comments below, and feel free to suggest any other weapons I may have missed. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.